I want to start today by asking something I doubt you've ever heard as an audience before, let alone seen it spelled across their shirt. And that is, why are you here today? Why did you guys decide to go to this educational speaking conference, which is essentially just a lecture? Because is that not what we have to force kids to do in schools every day? To go through what even philosophers would call the steep and rugged ascent that is learning. It's not exactly a flattering proposition. But as much as this word educational has a dismal connotation in our minds, our interests speak an entirely different story. How many of you guys have heard of the why game, where a child will ask a question and then just keep asking, why, but why? For those of you that haven't, it's all right. We're going to test it out first. I'm going to give my opinion on a topic, and I want you guys to reply after with why. I'll start. I don't like beans.
Why?
Well, because they're mushy and they don't taste very good.
Why?
Well, I assume because they're vegetables, and vegetables are quite literally the roots of all evil. Because there's no sugar or fat or salt or anything that makes them delicious to eat.
Why?
Well, because without those, they just become dull and repetitive, kind of like this conversation, if I'm being honest. Kids love asking this why game, perhaps a little too much, as I think we've just seen. And I was totally this type of kid, although I also got the second annoying trait, which was trying to answer the questions as well. And there wasn't a single time my parents could cop out with a simple, because I said so. We were going to find that answer. But this game does eventually fizzle out with children. And when it does, the pendulum then seems to swing too far the opposite direction. It stops being the why game and instead turns into the do we have to game. Even worse, adults will change their perception from kids won't shut up to kids just don't like to learn. But as hard as I try, I just can never get myself to believe this maxim. I mean, sure, kids might not like their fractions or their literary analysis, so instead they go play video games. But what are they doing while playing video games? They're learning over 1,000 dinosaurs' names or researching the best equipment statistics. On YouTube, they'll watch videos from the history of Rome to the modern physics of rocket engines, with my own calculus teacher having a channel with thousands of views teaching mathematics. Heck, even the biggest of jocks love learning. Don't believe me? Take fantasy football, the so aptly called D&D for jocks. That game is nothing but statistics and critical thinking, how hundreds of players will perform in hundreds of environments. And so much thinking are involved in these games that we just can't seem to pull kids away from. So why? Why are kids so enthralled in learning in these areas? And why does that then trump the more important education in schools? Well, why? It's because the kids know the why. Let's play our game again. I'll again give the statements, and I want you guys to be the annoying yet mightily endearing children in the audience asking me why. You ready? Kids love learning in video games.
Why?
Well, because they're stimulating. It entertains them, much like YouTube does. Well, because these videos, they draw in their audiences with interesting hooks and demonstrations, creating an interesting presentation, much like the competitiveness in fantasy does. Well, because all of these, the kids understand the benefits of the dull learning for how to help them achieve something they want to later. And for all of these, there's no need for the kids to even ask the why. They know why it's important to them, whether consciously or not. When I asked you guys my own why question earlier, why are you here today? How many of you quickly arrived at your answer? Whether it's to support a relative, or maybe you're familiar with TEDx. And considering none of you got up and left right when I asked it, I assume you all know your why already, or else this event would seem a complete waste of time. So why don't kids like traditional education? It's because they don't understand the why. Why learn advanced algebra or Shakespeare's sonnets? Why would education, say after elementary school, ever help them in their lives? Now, I know this sounds ridiculous to a room full of adults knowing full well the benefit of education by your jobs. But to someone who has never worked in a non-retail job or even experienced the need of a diploma to be hired, I think we underestimate just how foreign this concept can be. For example, my mom, she owns a preschool just north of here, and she sees all these same things. Her kids love to learn. These are the same kids still addicted to the Y game, after all. But just learning about their interests in garbage trucks and Paw Patrol can only take them so far. I distinctly remember a story she told me once about a kid who had no interest in learning any of her letters. And before I continue this, there's something you have to understand about preschoolers, and that they are notoriously hard to create motivation for to learn. Because while most kids might not understand the purpose for what they're learning, preschoolers have no concept of why learning would ever be beneficial to them. And why would they know their why? They have literally no previous connection to how learning has allowed them to achieve something they've wanted before in their life. Why learn what all of these strange symbols mean when that hasn't impeded anything they've wanted to do in their entire life so far? This is what my mom found in this student a couple years ago who, more than normal, had no interest in learning her letters. Each day was a struggle to try to relate it to her interests or engage her in games, hoping for a spark, but never quite finding that drive. That was until new baby brother came along. Suddenly, this kid approached my mom and asked how to spell her brother's name. And my mom, being the amazing educator that she is, ended up riding that wave not just to teaching the letters in her brother's name, but the whole alphabet. Because why stop at just baby brother's name when surely she would want to be able to describe him? And why not be able to read bedtime stories to him? This is the moment that kid figured out her why. Why continue learning what all of these strange symbols mean? Because she knew how it would help her achieve what she wanted, creating not just motivation to learn her letters, but a general positive association with learning that will help springboard each aspect of her educational journey. And this is similar, not just to this kid, but has been proven and time again in studies, such as the one done by the National Academy of Science, which shows that more active learning styles lead to better learning and retention. Now, this is great, and this is exactly what educators all over the world are doing. This concept of the why is the bedrock on how you spark motivation to learn. So then, why isn't this why just taught to every student? You know, like the why game, it seems we kind of just keep digging and digging without reaching a conclusion. But I promise, we're reaching it very soon. What is impeding the student's ability to understand their why? Well, what do students receive after learning? It's not often a new skill they want or knowledge they view as useful. Instead, all they receive, as I'm sure you have seen, is a test. A stressful test, which most see as only an opportunity for a negative outcome. And sure, the grade could be seen as a reward, but what happens when the grade stops possessing value? The motivation to learn then comes not from the positive reinforcement of a skill learned, but instead the negative reinforcement of avoiding punishment. Punishments which lead not to the positive association with learning that once gave my mom's preschooler zeal to learn the whole alphabet, but instead the opposite. The negative association that causes as soon as punishment is gone, the ceasing of one's educational journey, often right outside of high school and college. Testing is a great tool, don't get me wrong. It is great at measuring students' performances. But as far as the true purpose of learning goes, it seems to fall short. It's but one of a multitude of attributes in modern education that creates this negative association with learning. Not even mentioning outside circumstances like AI, casting more and more doubt into students' perceptions of if they'll ever need anything they got taught. Even just the simple act of forcing now stimulus-conditioned kids from social media to sit in a classroom for an hour straight. It works great when they value the class, but when there isn't that understanding of that why, it becomes dreaded. And this is the dread that we associate when we say kids just don't like learning. It's not that they dislike learning, it's that they don't like the environment in which they associate with it. I do have to cut some slack, though. I mean, this is the worst case scenario. Kids who just inherently don't care about their grades. There are, however, many kids who do have enough motivation to learn. I mean, you're staring right at the type of kid who will walk out of the dreaded long essay questions in history class and be remarking how fun the prompt was. And kids like me should be a slam dunk in creating motivation to learn. So, how does education treat this type of kid? Well, about a year ago, when talks of a statewide cell phone ban in schools were proposed, I decided to track how my time was divided in class to have a more informed opinion on the topic. And so throughout my sophomore year, I divided each minute of class into two categories: lecture time and independent work time. And of independent work time into two further: time it took for me to complete the work assigned and extra time I had left over. And so by dividing each minute of every class period for an entire year, I found that on an average 59-minute period, 25 minutes would be devoted to lecture, 18 minutes to time it took to complete work, and a whopping 16 minutes on average were left without anything for me to do. This meant that going into a week, I had an 84% chance to have an entire school day's worth of time just accrued in that extra time left over, unable to further pursue any of the interests in which I did know my why for. This is, I think, the equivalent of sitting all day in a meeting, which really just could have been an email. Except for us, it's happening 84% of weeks. This is not to speak ill of any teachers. I would hate for that to be what you guys came away with this from. Teachers are trying their best. There's simply too many students in each class for individualized attention, and too many limitations on how and what they can teach. This isn't to speak ill of the schools either. They try to fix these problems with promising referendums. They just have the same problem as the teachers, but one level up in the state. Regardless, this waste of time seems almost an inevitability. But just because it's inevitable, it doesn't change how disheartening it is for students. It leads them to wonder why they're stuck with how little autonomy they have. It leads me to wonder why I don't have 3-day weekends 84% of the time. Regardless, these are the two ways that lead to the same kids' ignorance of their why. The lack of understanding for why they need the content taught, and why the environment is as restrictive as it is. I realize now this speech might seem like preaching to the choir, giving a talk about creating motivation to learn in a room full of people who willingly went to an educational speaking conference. But I do want to stress the importance on understanding why others might not have this motivation. I think it's a common misconception that these people are just lazy or apathetic towards their betterment. But instead, I think they have just yet to find why they need their current education. The students wake up each day to a job they dislike, which they see no purpose for, all while getting yelled at for being lazy when they don't do the work that no one is telling them why they need to do, other than because I said so. And if that didn't work on toddlers, I don't think that's going to work on young adults. The why to education absolutely exists. There's no doubt about that. We just need to be able to communicate it better, to meet people where they're at, not as a problem or an adversary, but instead as a teammate, someone we can work together with to give them the best education they can get. And I, for one, think it's imperative we do this as soon as we can. Why? Why teach the why? Because education is the key to answering all other whys in the future. Thank you.